Hey guys, what's going on? So let's talk about this net neutrality thing, right? Net neutrality, a Federal Communications Commission policy implemented to protect American citizens from corporate ISP abuse. Meant to protect our personal rights, stop ISPs from selling our personal information to outside, companies. Policy meant to stop ISPs from strangleholding internet connections to certain websites. Other things of that nature, right? Now, the federal regulation on net neutrality is something that concerns me, right? Anytime the federal government gets involved in institutes regulation or policy, often or not, even the stuff that's meant to protect and benefit us tends to get warped against us over time, right? So why am I for net neutrality? And the reason why I'm for net neutrality comes down to this basic fact that terrifies me because no one's discussing it. It's not something that's commonly addressed, and it's the biggest issue. It's why net neutrality must exist, and it comes down to ISP monopolies. Now, people they shrug it off because they're like, ISPs don't have monopoly. There's probably some limited or small connection. I've heard other people in podcasts say stuff like that. There's small competition. It's not enough, but there's small competition. It comes down to there's no competition. And the reason why there's no competition is not because, these ISPs are roughing up the local competitors. I mean, I'm sure they are, but because of a specific policy in place by local bureaucracies, right? We're talking about city council and stuff. ISP approaches the city council and says, "Hey, rural city council, or hey, industrial big time city location. Here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to build these trenches along your roads, and these trenches are going to be available for us to lay hardline cables through, DSL, fiber optic, high speed connection cables, and these connection cables are going to run straight to your business and straight to the homes. And because of that, we will be able to provide your citizens of your local city and towns high-speed internet, with great connection speeds and, stability, right? Stuff that Wi-Fi just can't provide yet. We just don't have the technology for Wi-Fi to provide huge spectrum internet connections to huge communities of people, right, that have stability. We don't have that technology. Maybe if that technology makes its way into the horizon, maybe this ISP issue will find its way out the window, but until that happens, it's not. So these companies build these trenches. They own the trenches, right, by contract, and some of them set up 5 to 10 year, 15 year, 30-year contracts with the local city council saying this is our trench, we lay our cable in it, right? All right. And these companies aren't going to let other ISPs lay cable in this trench because that creates free market competition. Even if it's only 2 ISPs doing it, if let's just say, Time Warner is providing connection speeds to my local area, and their customer service is poor, well, I should have the ability to move over to Comcast. But that's not what's happening. Time Warner isn't the company that I have issues with right now, but the company I have issues with is the only one that owns the high-speed internet in our local area. I only have one choice with them, and even with net neutrality in place, you can see these companies are abusing their monopoly, right? I'll set up multiple appointments in which I'll stay home from work or come home early from work so that they can come fix my internet because my internet didn't work or doesn't work or has limited capabilities for what I pay for, the plan I pay for. And the companies won't show up. They won't send a driver. They'll be like, "Oh, they went there and you weren't there." And I'll be like, "I was in my house the whole day. I sat on the front yard this last 2 times, and the company just didn't show up." Right? And then on the 4th time that they said they were going to send someone finally did show up 2 hours after they were supposed to show up, and they stated that it's a router issue, right? But that they refused to provide us a new router. Now, I have a 7-year-old router. It's a single channel router. They don't even sell those on the market anymore. It's so old. I pay the rent on that router. I pay the money for that router, and I can only use that router because that's the one provided by the company. I can't go buy my own router and use it. I've tried. I have my own, router and modem that I've tried to use before, and it won't work. And I asked the company, and they said it won't work, and they won't connect to it. They have to have a specific router that will only work with them, right? And so they have this vast monopoly in the area, and they already provide me poor customer service. But net neutrality protects my ability to connect to these different sites, the sites that they don't even like. They don't like Netflix, right? Netflix is an entity of them, and Netflix gets used a lot, and streaming data is a high bandwidth kind of thing, right? And everyone uses Netflix, or a lot of people use Netflix, a lot of local people, right? So I bet you money they don't like Netflix, and I bet money they don't like Amazon.com, and I bet money, or especially when you're streaming Prime, and I bet money they don't like YouTube because you're streaming videos, right? These sites that eat up these huge bandwidths, the company have to provide extra assets to use, right? And so they don't like it. They'd rather make their own sites, which they could profit off of if they're going to have to provide bandwidth to them, right? But they can't make their own sites because the net neutrality is protected the internet, and the internet is this massive world of free market competition. If I don't like Google, I can just go to some other web browser. If I don't like Amazon, I can go to some other shopping site. If I don't like YouTube, I can go to some other video upload site, right? If I don't like Netflix, I can go to some other video watching site. So the access to these sites on the web is a huge free market competition, right? And net neutrality protects my ability to access all these sites equally. So that means, my local service provider, who has a monopoly because they're the only ones laying cable in the trenches and the only ones running those cables to my houses or to our houses, still has to provide with equal content. They have to provide with equal access only. So if I pay for a premium plan, and I'm supposed to provide a certain connection speed, even if I don't make that connection speed, this connection speed they're providing to you has to be used equally along all those sites. They can't strangle the bandwidth on Netflix connection. They can't strangle the bandwidth on. And so what it comes down to, the biggest concern, right? And I've heard some people talk about it where like, oh, it was the consumers who fixed the problem with Comcast, extorting Netflix. And that's not what happened. I mean, net neutrality is what fixed the problem with Comcast extorting Netflix. If anyone doesn't know that story, what ended up happening is Comcast contacted Netflix and said, hey, our users are using too much bandwidth on you guys. We have to provide extra assets and bandwidth to provide connection to Netflix. You guys need to pay us a fee because too many of our people are using you. And Netflix said, that's kind of silly. We're not going to pay you a fee. So Comcast said, okay. And then they started withering the connection, right? And while they started withering the connection, customer service complaints started to rise, right? We saw customer service starting to rise. You can find these facts online. You can go, I will try and provide links in this channel and just point out the stuff that you can go access if you want to. But this did happen. And Netflix is like, okay, here's what we'll do, Comcast. We'll build hubs next to all your locations. So they did. They built hubs next to all the major locations, right? And what the hub does, basically, it reduces the bandwidth connection required to exchange data between, the ISP and Netflix, right? They built these hubs. Comcast was dissatisfied with that. They wanted to extort Netflix for money, right? And we have to be concerned about fallout effects of this, right? If Comcast is extorting Netflix for money, then Netflix is going to have to raise their price for consumers to use. We'll probably have less access to the content we want, and they'll probably submit less content overall, right? So we're going to pay more and have less access to content because now Netflix has to pay Comcast for us to have a connection speed appropriate enough to stream stuff off of them, right? And that's ridiculous, right? So Netflix got in this battle with Comcast. The consumers complained. The FCC stepped in and said, that's not ethical. We're going to go ahead and institute net neutrality laws. Net neutrality laws, basically protect me from having my information sold outside parties, right? And they protect me from having the ISPs control my stuff. Now, we've already talked about how the ISPs use the trenches to control and set up their monopolies in the local area, right? And I've heard people submit the debate, and it's a straw man argument about the wireless cell phone companies, and look at all their free market competition. And the problem is wireless cell phone companies have towers. They can broadcast signals. ISPs don't have that capability, at least, like I said, not yet. The technology doesn't exist. So we still need hard lines running to our house. Now, if you're saying that opening up net neutrality is stifling innovation, well, I will tell you that monopolies stifle innovation. So a company with lots of money that's wanting to spend millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars lobbying Congress to get rid of net neutrality, Comcast, has been doing that. Those companies are very capable of stifling innovation. If we saw what happened with Microsoft, they were extorting companies. They were extorting and abusing their authority and their monopoly to, buy out companies and then sell them away or break them apart to, stifle access to like Apple products and stuff like that. Microsoft had to be broken up by the federal government because of their monopoly, which is a perfect example of net neutrality's reason for existence, right? I've also heard people talk about, one of the biggest issues is like web-based companies, these huge web-based companies, being for net neutrality, and that means that's a detractor for being for net neutrality. And I say that's irrelevant. I don't care. And the reason why I don't care, like I said before, is if Google gives me a problem, I'll just move to another web browser. And if Amazon gives me a problem, I'll just move to another selling company. If, YouTube gives me a problem, I'll just move to another web uploader. I've already talked about it before, so I don't need it up. So because there's free market competition that has existed and thrived under the policy of net neutrality, right? Net neutrality exists, and these companies have thrived under it. Because they exist, I think that pointing out that Google or Amazon or any of these other companies are for net neutrality is irrelevant. It's pointless, and it's a straw man argument. It's a waste of my time to even address it. And I've heard some people bring up transparency, and I don't understand why this is the biggest concern. They're like, well, I'd be for federal regulation if you just ordered transparency. And I was like, yeah, I would love to know what Google or YouTube is restricting me to have access to because they don't agree socially or politically with that content, right? I would love to know that. I would love to know just as much about what the ISPs are doing. Like, for example, are they telling me they're going to provide me with a 100 Mbps connection, but really their hub is too far away from my home, so by the time the signal bounces back to them, I only end up with a 10 Mbps connection, right? Right, and they're doing that, but they don't have transparency laws that require them to do that, so they don't have to, right? They don't have to broadcast that information. But I would love to have transparency laws, but that's a drop in the pond. The pond is net neutrality. Net neutrality exists to protect the citizens. Now, very rarely will the U.S. government implement policy that protects the user and the consumer against corporate greed and corporate policy. We rarely do that. Normally, what the federal government does is institute policy that gives corporate government or corporate institution more power to abuse the consumer. That's normally what we do. Look at local bureaucracies giving, single trench authority to, these ISPs who now have like district monopolies in our local areas, right? So, net neutrality should exist, and net neutrality should exist for those reasons. Also, before I leave, I'd just like to submit one point for you. The man who instituted, the commissioner of the FCC who instituted net neutrality, I believe was either fired, let go, or retired immediately after implementing net neutrality. The next man to take over, commissioner of the FCC, immediately tried to abolish net neutrality. When that failed, he resigned from FCC and became a lobbyist for the ISPs. And then the next commissioner of FCC was a pre-existing lobbyist for the ISPs. These ISPs are trying really gosh dang hard to get rid of net neutrality, and to me that means keep it. Don't get rid of something that lobbyists are trying to get rid of. Unless you want to get in bed with the lobby groups, because, these companies want net neutrality to go because it gives them monopoly and authority to abuse their consumers and abuse their internet connections and make profits, that is the purpose of corporations. They don't care about the consumers. They will abuse the consumers. They will extort the consumers. They will treat the consumers like crap if they can, right? We know that free market competition is the purest form of, consumer law. Consumers thrive under a free market society. And we also know that America is incredibly good at taking away free market competition, right? We don't have free market competition. My solution is to keep net neutrality until new technology can be instituted that'll limit the ISP's authority over local areas. Thank you, guys.